The committee will come to order. The chair notes the presence of a quorum. Pursuant to committee rules, members of the committee may submit written opening statements for the record. I ask that members may revise and extend the remarks on the measure to be considered at this markup and have those remarks included in the record without objection. So ordered. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess of the committee at any time. Pursuant to Committee Rule 3I, the chair announces that I may postpone further proceedings today on the question of approving any measure or matter or adopting an amendment on which a recorded vote is ordered. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here to mark up the committee print under consideration today, which responds to the committee's instructions under HCon Resolution 14, the concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2025. More than any other committee, we have a tremendous opportunity to promote access to America's abundant resources, steward them well, and harness their vast potential to benefit the American people and to impact the budget. Before we get into what I'm sure will be a robust discussion on the legislation before us, I want to take a few minutes to step back and first examine what brought us here today. America is in a fiscal crisis. Our national debt currently clocks in at a staggering $36.8 trillion, and it's growing every second. In a city where money is allocated and spent without a second thought, some may lose sight of just how huge a trillion really is. If you stacked $1 trillion $1 bills, it would reach about 67,000 miles, almost 3 times around the Earth. The 36.8 trillion would wrap around the Earth nearly 110 times. Our founders signed the U.S. Constitution in 1787. If the government had started borrowing $1 million every single day since then, our debt would only be about $86 billion. In fact, borrowing $1 million a day, our nation would be approaching its 1,753rd birthday before we would hit the $36.8 trillion mark. I say all this to illustrate the near insurmountable uphill battle we are currently facing. The federal government has been wasting taxpayer dollars at breakneck speed and borrowing against itself, and make no mistake, our time is running out. The American people know this, and that's why they handed us a mandate last November. It's time to get our fiscal house in order. House Republicans have once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver on President Trump's agenda by passing a reconciliation bill that unleashes the full power of American energy and innovation, builds upon Tax Cuts and Jobs Act tax cuts to grow our economy, and set our nation on a more responsible fiscal path into the future. Under the Biden administration, we witnessed rampant waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer dollars. Our constituents have seen enough and are demanding long-term change here in Washington. For too long, politicians in Washington have been content to spend like there's no tomorrow without a single thought to the fiscal ramifications. That's why this bill takes a hard look at the programs under our jurisdiction, cuts wasteful programs, and incentivizes resource production to generate revenue. Today, the committee will have a chance to act decisively. No one innovates or harnesses natural resources better than we do here in the United States. We're working to bring production back to America, where we do it more safely, cleanly, and efficiently than anywhere else in the world. We have the opportunity to secure our supply chains and restore high-paying American jobs, all while ensuring we're wisely stewarding the natural resources with which our nation has been blessed. So today, don't let partisan politics distract you from the facts. We are delivering on the American people's mandate to restore common sense to the federal government and stop the fiscal bleeding. I look forward to the discussion of the bill before us, and I yield back. I now recognize the ranking member for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if you're concerned about trillions in debt, why are you giving trillions away to billionaires in tax cuts? Let's be clear about what's happening today. This markup is one of the most consequential proceedings this committee has ever seen, and not in a good way. We're considering the most extreme anti-environment bill in American history. It's not about deficit reduction. It's about powerful groups that fund GOP campaigns, and they have decided this is the moment to strike, to dismantle protections for our environment, wildlife, and public health, make it impossible to challenge or even question polluting projects, mandate a massive expansion of offshore drilling, putting communities from Alaska to Florida at risk of catastrophic oil spills. Auction off millions of acres of pristine public lands to industry, including wilderness areas and sacred tribal sites. And under the guise of a bill that slashes spending, give away billions in subsidies to the coal industry, corporate irrigators in California, and other special interests. The vast majority of Americans hate all of this. They cherish our public lands. They value clean air, clean water, wildlife. They oppose corrupt special interest giveaways. The unpopularity of this bill is why Republicans are jamming it into budget reconciliation. It's the only way that they have a chance of passing it. Americans will see this for the betrayal that it is. We all remember Trump promising to deliver the cleanest air and water, bragging on the campaign trail that he was an environmentalist. Mr. Chairman, your tagline on the website for this committee is putting conservatives back into conservation. Your Earth Day messages sound like Teddy Roosevelt, promising to champion outdoor recreation and conservation, to steward natural resources for future generations. When Republicans say things like that and turn around and jam through a bill like this, Americans rightfully feel betrayed. It's the same with Trump's promises to lower costs, grow the economy, and to protect Medicaid. He must have had his fingers crossed because he's crashing the economy, driving up costs for American families, and pushing House Republicans to jam through this bill that makes all of it worse. The Natural Resources title, which we call the Environmental Liquidation for Billionaires Act, is a massive betrayal of anyone who cares about clean air and water, wildlife, outdoor recreation, protection of pristine wilderness areas, and sacred tribal sites, especially disadvantaged communities and tribes who are blocked from challenging or even questioning projects that could devastate them. That's why my Democratic colleagues and I will fiercely oppose this bill. We'll call out these betrayals all day, maybe into tomorrow. Our amendments will give Republicans every opportunity to step back from the abyss of their extremism, to show some moderation, compromise, and thoughtfulness. We'll highlight the central betrayal of this bill, paying for massive giveaways to billionaires by sticking it to ordinary Americans, helping the world's richest people get richer by slashing vital services families depend on for basic needs, and even charging the public a new fee to comment during environmental review processes. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that this Environmental Liquidation for Billionaires Act will produce something around $15 or $17 billion, if you believe it. I don't, but it's breathtakingly reckless. Gutting bedrock environmental protections, condemning vulnerable communities to long-term pollution impacts, turning public lands and waters into industrial sacrifice zones just to finance a tiny portion of your giveaway to billionaires. I predict most Republicans will skip this markup. For months, they've been hiding from constituents, canceling town halls. They know how furious people are over the chaos of Trump's first 100 days. So they'll probably hide in their offices and file in at the last minute to vote in lockstep the way Trump wants them to. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they prove me wrong. I hope they hang around for the course of this debate. I hope there's still some Teddy Roosevelt conservationists over there. Today's the test, though, because anyone who claims to be a conservationist has to show up at our only hearing and participate in the debate before this bill goes to the floor. Explain why you support the most extreme environmental wrecking ball in American history. For the American people watching, Democrats are going to fight tooth and nail against this anti-environment, anti-community, billionaire boondoggle. We're already fighting for your basic freedoms against a would-be dictator trying to dismantle our Constitution with fawning support from House Republicans. That fight now includes your freedom to breathe clean air, drink safe water, enjoy your public lands, and raise your families in communities protected by public health and environmental safeguards. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Pursuant to the markup notice, it is now in order to consider the committee print to comply with the reconciliation directives included in Section 2001 of HCON Resolution 14, the concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2025. Without objection, the committee print will be considered read and open to amendment at any point. Does any member wish to be recognized for purposes of debate on the committee print? I recognize myself for 5 minutes. You know, I've often talked about my childhood in rural Arkansas and how I saw firsthand what being a responsible steward. And it didn't mean that you didn't use the resources that you had. It meant that you didn't let your resources go to waste, or that you didn't abuse those resources, that you left what you had in better shape for future generations. And that's what built the conservation movement here in America. It's not a preservationist movement where we say a hands-off approach. It's where we become responsible and good stewards of the things God has blessed us with. In my childhood experience, it goes back to a garden where we planted that garden, we tended it, we took care of it, and whatever came out of that garden was either eaten, it was frozen, it was canned, it was fed to an animal, or even saved for seed. We didn't let anything go to waste. And that's the kind of responsible resource management that we should be applying to our nation's resources as well. Our legislation unleashes the United States natural resource wealth to generate over $18.5 billion in savings and new revenue for the budget, while increasing access to America's abundant natural resources cleanly, safely, and responsibly. We've worked closely with members of Congress, state and local leaders, stakeholders, our colleagues in the Senate and the Congressional Budget Office to generate large revenues for the budget by answering President Trump's call to unleash American energy dominance. The opportunity to generate resource revenue has never been greater in the energy and mineral space. Global demand for affordable, reliable energy will only continue to grow, and President Trump has made it clear that America will rise to meet that demand. By reinstating onshore and offshore oil and gas lease sales, incentivizing responsible development in Alaska, holding annual geothermal lease sales, and ensuring a fair process for critical mineral development nationwide, we generate billions of dollars in new revenue and savings for the federal government. Increasing production right here at home will create American jobs and drive economic growth. Economic growth that's not even considered in CBO's analysis of the $18.5 billion. Demand for energy resources is increasing exponentially, and the United States can develop its energy and mineral resources responsibly rather than relying on foreign nations that lack meaningful environmental safeguards, while adding to our coffers at home instead of exporting our wealth overseas. To monetize our resources efficiently, we must ensure producers aren't subjected to years of bureaucratic red tape. The main reason our permitting process lags years, sometimes decades, behind other developed countries is that litigious environmental groups have weaponized well-intentioned laws, costing taxpayers billions of dollars and delaying much-needed development and innovation while doing nothing to actually protect the environment. We're taking steps to create new revenue sources for federal government, restore common sense to federal permitting processes, and rein in frivolous litigation. We're also reining in bureaucratic slush funds created under the IRA. This is exactly the kind of government waste President Trump and his administration have committed to rooting out within the federal government, and we will do the same here in Congress. We've also directed the Forest Service to utilize long-term timber sale contracts to generate income by ensuring consistent timber supplies to our forest products industry while supporting economic investment and job creation in rural America to exceed their current timber harvest levels. In the short term, timber sales will generate significant revenue for the federal government. In the long term, these provisions will enhance the health of our forest, increase their resilience, and thus save millions of dollars on future wildfire suppression costs. Finally, we've invested in water storage and conveyance projects across the country. We are unlocking the full potential of American energy, American resources, and American ingenuity to save billions of dollars for the federal government, create jobs, and grow our economy. I look forward to today's discussion and to getting the legislation across the finish line. I yield back. Does anybody else wish to be recognized? Ranking Member Huffman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The central betrayal in Republicans' Environmental Liquidation for Billionaires Act is the way it turns our environment into industrial sacrifice zones to enrich billionaires and sticks everyday Americans with trillions in cost. Republicans say this is about deficit reduction. Really? then why include billions in new handouts to special interests? Why give corporate irrigators $2 billion for a controversial dam project in California that floods sacred tribal lands and violates state law? Why slash royalties that oil, gas, and coal companies pay to the federal government? Why expand non-competitive oil and gas leasing and give the secretary discretion to literally give some leases away for nothing? No wonder Republican leadership has told members to stay quiet and not participate in this debate. No wonder, although they're here right now because they need to establish a quorum, we're going to soon see our Republican colleagues leave this room and head back to their offices. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they will be here to participate in the debate. But I think they've got some tough questions to answer if they do, because this bill is indefensible. Just look at the offshore drilling mandate. 30 massive new lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico, whether we need them or not. Never mind that 80% of current leases in the Gulf are not producing oil. The industry is sitting on nearly 2,000 unused leases across 10 million acres, but this bill says, here, take some more. And don't bother with environmental reviews. Don't evaluate oil spill risks to coastal economies. Don't consult tribes. Don't do any mitigation to prevent the world's most endangered whale, found only in these waters, from going extinct. It's just as cartoonishly extreme onshore. In addition to slashing royalties, the bill auctions off vast stretches of our public lands for pennies on the dollar, and even authorizes Secretary Burgum to give them away for free if he feels that is warranted. And then there's the new pay-to-play permitting scheme, a cauldron of corruption unlike anything we have ever seen. Instead of a serious NEPA review, polluters can write their own environmental impact statement, pay a special fee, and have it quickly rubber stamped, and then get total immunity from legal challenges. Even if their environmental review is fake, even if it consists of them writing in crayon, "I love corruption." It's an elite buyer's club for corporate polluters. If you're wealthy enough to pay the fee, you get NEPA approval for your project to poison someone's air, contaminate their water, clear-cut the forest near some community, or bulldoze a sacred site. Maybe Republicans will even send you a note saying, "Thanks for shopping. Enjoy your immunity." Make no mistake, real communities all over America will suffer if this bill passes. Pollution will increase, including forever chemicals that foul our air and water and cause cancer. Jobs tied to outdoor recreation, conservation, and clean energy jobs, jobs that vastly outnumber fossil fuel and mining jobs, will be decimated. The climate crisis will get worse, and taxpayers will lose billions from the sweetheart deals that this bill lavishes on special interests. No wonder Republicans don't want to participate in the debate. They want to keep all of this on the down low. They're hoping Americans are too distracted by all the other Trump chaos to notice what's happening to their environment, their public lands, their health, and their wallets. But people will notice. They'll see exactly who this bill is for and who gets stuck with the costs. They'll know what you did to them. This bill is a smash and grab by a party that sees its governing trifecta slipping away. The worst 100 days for any president in modern history. Chaos everywhere. Polls cratering, recession looming, constituents demanding that you stand up to Trump, stop ducking town halls, do your job. And instead of listening and stepping back from the abyss of MAGA extremism, Republicans are rushing to give away the store to their big money pals while they still can. Americans see all of this, but they also see Democrats showing up and standing up for their right to clean air, a healthy environment, responsible stewardship of public lands, and policies that serve the public interest, not just big money polluters and profiteers. I hope a few Republicans will join us today in making this destructive bill less extreme by supporting the amendments that we are about to offer. Today would be a great day to get off the MAGA crazy train before it crashes. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? Representative Stauber, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chairman. I rise in strong support of the committee print and want to begin by thanking you for your leadership, along with the work of our colleagues on the committee to develop this package. But most importantly, I want to thank the staff of the Natural Resources Committee who have worked tirelessly over the past several months to put this package together. The package before us today raises $18.5 billion for the federal government over the next 10 years, an important step in lessening the burden that our annual deficits have on future generations of Americans. We're going to be able to do that in large part by allowing the American people to responsibly and safely develop our country's vast natural resources that belong to the American people and should be put to the best use on behalf of our country. By contrast, while today we will mark up a package that saves Americans $18.5 billion over the next 10 years, back in September of 2021, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle marked up a package as part of their most recent reconciliation bill that cost the American taxpayers nearly $32 billion over a 10-year window. Think about that difference. Mr. Chairman, I expect we're going to hear plenty of hyperbole today as how, quote, Team Extreme, end quote, is tearing apart, quote, bedrock environmental laws, end quote, laws of kneeling to, quote, big oil, et cetera, et cetera. I can promise my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the Republicans today are not playing bingo today. Frankly, that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, today, we're going to be responsibly unleashing America's natural resources, which will generate equitable returns for the American people through royalty, rental, and auction fees that are bound for the U.S. Treasury and ultimately Americans in every corner of this great nation. This package is a win-win for the American people. This package achieves the goals of reconciliation by helping get our fiscal house in order. And as an added benefit in the process, it will make us less dependent on foreign adversarial nations for our natural resources and help keep us from having to continue to export our environmental guilt to countries that utilize child and forced slave labor and have terrible environmental and labor track records. Mr. Chairman, I am proud to support this package today. This is a good package before us and one that will serve the American people for many years to come. I hope my colleagues on the other side of the dais recognize that and join me in voting to support this package, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for pointing out your own childhood and how that informed your work. It made me think about my childhood. I grew up in the beautiful state of New Mexico, where we have some of, I think, the most gorgeous streams and mountains possible. And I hiked those mountains and we fished in those streams. And in some of those streams, you could not fish because mining had killed off everything in those beautiful streams. And it took decades for us to clean it up. I have been to places that should be as pristine as you could imagine, but oil spills have leaked into groundwater, and I have traveled through this state and noted the countless, but we actually have counted them, abandoned oil and gas wells that were never cleaned up. But I am also from a state that relies on oil and gas for our revenue in order to fund our schools. So we are a state that recognizes the value of this resource. And what have we been doing in the last so many years? We have been saying, you know what? You can pass environmental laws and require that oil and gas companies do not leak methane into the air. You can increase the accountability so that they are not damaging your groundwater. And yes, indeed, you can increase royalty rates. And what happens when you do all these things? Oil and gas production can still go up. New Mexico has recognized some of the largest increases in oil and gas production, even though we have increased our environmental protection, increased our oversight, and increased our revenues and our royalty rates. So why can't we do the same thing here? We can't do the same thing here because Republicans are in charge. And Republicans, instead of saying, you know what, this is a good time to increase environmental protection, this is a good time to say, you know, those royalty rates that we've had since the 1920s, it was a good idea to increase them? No, Republicans are saying, no, no, let's go back to the 1920 royalty rate. Why would you do that? When the oil and gas companies have had some of their largest profits ever. Americans were suffering at the gas stations with those high prices. There was a possibility that oil and gas companies could have reduced their oil and gas, their prices at the pump, but they chose not to. They chose not to have accountability. But we are here on the guise of saying we need to do something about the deficit. Well, it is the Republican bill that will increase the deficit by trillions. By trillions. So this isn't about the deficit. This is about taking advantage of this moment and jamming through some of the worst environmental laws that this Congress will have seen. And this is about taking action which will hurt states like mine, which rely on oil and gas revenue. And when the federal government reduces its royalty rate, it is reducing the amount of revenue that a state like mine and a state like many of yours on this panel will receive. So think about your own citizens when you decide what you're going to vote on, because you are reducing the amount of revenue that your state will get. And for those of you who represent tribes, this bill will deprive your tribal nations from being able to provide input and review and objection to some of the biggest plans that will happen with regards to oil and gas and coal and uranium and other kind of mining. Why are you cutting off community input from tribes and from the communities that you represent? Community input is a good thing. We should not be afraid of listening to our citizens. And so we will indeed be offering amendments to provide you with an opportunity to think about your tribes, to think about your states, to think about should we be giving away our precious resources to China. Hopefully you will come to the conclusion that maybe we should not. Maybe we should protect our resources for generations to come so that we can continue to hike and ranch and farm in the beautiful lands that we all grew up in. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? Mr. Magaziner, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very disappointed by this Republican bill we have in front of us today because it's a missed opportunity. Now, this committee deals with serious topics, and we could be working together across the aisle to tackle them. We could be working together on good legislation to create good-paying domestic clean energy jobs so that we can affordably power this country for generations. We could be working together to support the fisheries surveys and weather monitoring and basic science at NOAA, which is critical to supporting fishermen and farmers in Rhode Island and all across the country. We could be working together to promote strong management of national forests and protecting against wildfire, supporting national parks. But instead, this bill guts all of those programs to pay for tax cuts for billionaires and giveaways to big oil. Understand what this is. This is a fire sale. My Republican colleagues are selling out farmers and fishermen, selling off our public lands, selling off our minerals. Before this markup is over, they may try to sell off the office furniture, anything that they can think of to try to find the money to pay for yet more tax cuts for Elon Musk and the billionaires who don't need it. This bill strips away funding from the national parks. We hear all the time on this committee about how badly national parks are under-resourced and understaffed, from the Great Smoky Mountains to Yellowstone to Slater Mill in Rhode Island. This bill cuts funding for parks even more. It cuts funding for national forests when we need to be investing more to prevent water fires. It takes away critical conservation funding for public lands, and importantly, and I'm going to be talking a lot about this today, this bill would cripple the life-saving work of NOAA. NOAA, which is vital to Rhode Island and coastal communities across the country to support the fishing industry, which is the source of thousands of jobs in my district. weather monitoring at NOAA, which is fundamental to all of our daily lives. Just last week, the administration sent an agency-wide email announcing that they've eliminated 1,000 NOAA employees with over 27,000 years of collective experience. And what does this bill do for NOAA? Does it bring back those staff to help get fishing season open on time, to help get the agency fully resourced before hurricane season? No, it does not. It takes away funding, making it even harder to do all of those things. So why are we here? This is a question of whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the fishermen and the farmers and the working people of this country, or are you on the side of the billionaires and big oil? This bill brings back non-competitive leasing to benefit the big oil and mining companies. I heard the chairman talk about how the federal debt is out of control, and you know what? I agree with that. So why in the world would we get rid of competitive leasing, which ensures that the American taxpayer gets the best possible price for the resources that we lease out to the big oil and gas and mining companies? If we're going to be opening up a market for big oil to drill on public lands, I think the very least we can do is ask for a fair price that actually raises revenue for taxpayers for these resources that belong to all of us. And the best way to get that price for the American people is through competition. But this bill doesn't do that. This bill has non-competitive leasing. So again, who does this bill work for? It doesn't work for the American people. It doesn't work for farmers and fishermen. It doesn't tackle the debt the way that it could. Instead, it is giveaway after giveaway to the billionaires and the big oil and gas and mining companies who are making plenty of money and do not need our charity. So I asked my Republican colleagues, and this is going to be a test today, work with us to make this bill better. I don't know that we're going to get it to a point that we can support it, but we have ideas for how to make this bill better. And I know a number of my Republican colleagues ran on and campaigned on their willingness to be bipartisan and their willingness to cross the line when it's the right thing for their constituents. So let's see. Let's see if any of our Republican colleagues vote even once with us on any of these amendments to improve this bill. Let's find out. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Boebert, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am proud to support this committee print for the budget reconciliation. The legislation we are considering today delivers on our promise to prioritize American energy dominance while generating $18.5 billion in revenue to offset critical investments in our nation's future. By mandating quarterly offshore oil and gas lease sales, expanding opportunities in the Gulf of America and Alaska's Cook Inlet, and authorizing new sales in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, this proposal taps into our nation's vast natural resources. This legislation also includes my American Energy Act that will help reduce the backlog at the Bureau of Land Management by extending the length of drilling permits to 4 years. Unfortunately, the backlog is quite extensive due to the Biden administration's bureaucrats that were stonewalling energy permit applications. It also fixes the problem caused by activist judges and environmentalist litigants by reducing the power of judges to unilaterally vacate an energy lease that was approved by the Bureau of Land Management. These measures are projected to generate billions of dollars, ensuring that we fund priorities like border security, defense, and tax relief without adding to the national debt. This plan slashes those ridiculous job-killing royalty rates from the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, because let's be real, the only thing that act inflated was the egos of Washington swamp creatures. By returning oil and gas royalty rates to their pre-Inflation Reduction Act levels, we reduce burdens on our energy producers, incentivize domestic production, and make energy costs affordable for American families. It also rolls back restrictive resource management plans crafted by Biden's bureaucrats, freeing up opportunities for responsible development that balances economic growth and environmental stewardship. We want to be good stewards of our land, and I believe that we are. By boosting domestic energy, we reduce reliance on foreign adversaries, strengthen national security, and create thousands of good-paying American jobs. Those jobs will be right here at home and not in China. This reconciliation package is part of our America First agenda that puts hardworking taxpayers first. It aligns with the president's America First agenda that puts a call in runaway spending, streamlined government, and delivers results. This committee has done its part by crafting a plan that not only meets its reconciliation instructions, but also sets a foundation for long-term prosperity. I urge my colleagues to support this committee print. Let's pass this legislation through committee, secure our energy independence, bolster our economy, and make America great again. Together, we can deliver on the mandate given to us by the American people to get one big, beautiful bill to President Trump's desk. I urge the adoption. I thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield.
The young lady yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? Ms. Velasquez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here we go again. This is my second budget reconciliation markup in the last 2 weeks. And without hesitation, I can tell the American people, Republicans are writing a budget for billionaires, not for working families. They are eliminating the low-income heating and energy assistance program, eliminating FEMA's shelter and services program, and slashing $2.46 billion in clean and drink water state revolving loans funds. In jurisdictions like Puerto Rico, where the water infrastructure has faced long-standing challenges, including aging system and financial constraint, reductions of these revolving funds will be catastrophic. All of this to bankroll more tax giveaways to the ultra-rich. So I pose the question, whatever happens to fiscal responsibility? Oops, I forgot. It only applies when we have a Democratic president. As Republicans consider all avenues to make cuts for the rich, their proposals will hurt those that depend on Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. At a time when families are struggling with high prices because of tariffs, Republicans are doubling down on efforts to help big oil executives and billionaires profit any way they can. Republicans want to turn national parks and sacred sites into oil fields and strip mines, no cleanup required. It is reckless, dangerous, and an insult to frontline and tribal communities. Big oil doesn't need another handout. They're making record profits while Americans pay the price with polluted air, rising health risks, and climate disasters. Fossil fuels pollute. Climate change is real, and the numbers don't lie. In the 1980s, the US averaged just 3 major weather disasters per year. From 2014 to 2013, that number surged to 17, which is more than a 5-fold increase. The financial and human toll is staggering. Since 1980, $395 billion disasters have cost the US economy $2.77 trillion adjusted for inflation and claimed the lives of nearly 16,500 people. The GOP's plan is completely disconnected from the global reality we face, as it would gut clean energy jobs, wildfire prevention, mine cleanup, and tribal water infrastructure, killing good-paying jobs and exacerbating recovery costs in red and blue states alike. This is a full-on assault on climate resilience and public safety. Democrats are fighting to protect the basic freedoms every American deserves: clean air, safe water, and a healthy planet to raise our kids on. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Min, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was elected, I didn't imagine that 4 months into my tenure, I'd be voting on what I think is very clearly the most destructive legislation in U.S. history when it comes to our environment and public spaces. This is a huge giveaway to big oil, and I know that a number of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have made a lot out of the fact that this ostensibly will raise $18 billion, but it gives away many more dollars to the big oil companies that primarily benefit to the mining companies out there. And we've heard the different ways in which it does that through the reductions in royalties, through a lot of the giveaways, the lowest bidder provisions. This is a bill that is just packed with giveaway after giveaway. And I think that it's important for us to recognize the context in which this is taking place, because climate change is happening right now, regardless of what we think of it. In districts like mine, we worry all the time now about the threat of wildfires. We know that with the drier foliage that we have, with the harder blowing Santa Ana winds, which reach 100 miles an hour this past year, we are going to face that threat. We're facing rising temperatures throughout the world. India just hit 140 degrees last year. We've seen disasters arise throughout the world right now. And we are starting to face biblical level temperature and climate right now. And the sad thing about this all is that when we look back in 100 years, we're going to say that the temperatures that we experience right now, the extreme weather events, these were extremely benign, that these were the most benign and coolest temperatures that we experienced in the last 100 years. And so if we have people in our lives that we love, that we think are going to be around in 2050 or 2070 or 2100, we owe an obligation to them to act right now. And this is the opposite of that. We need to be moving forward, not backward. We need to be weaning ourselves off of fossil fuels, not moving aggressively back into what is an outdated technology at this point. We have a moral and economic imperative to do this, and yes, an economic one, because the dollars we're talking about, even if we ignore the fact that most of this bill is geared towards giving tons and tons to big oil companies, the economic impacts that we're facing from climate change are accelerating right now. Many, many billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in losses from the California wildfires just last year. We see natural disasters resulting in huge losses over and over and over, and these are going to accelerate. And any economist out there that's looking ahead has estimated that we're going to be facing many trillions of dollars in costs from climate change. So we need to be thinking about that. We need to be thinking about what it means when we talk about the American dream in this country. Because the American dream is, yes, it's about economic opportunity. It's also about allowing our children to grow up in clean spaces, to breathe clean air, to have access to our beautiful public lands in this country, to have access to clean water. And again, this bill does the opposite of that. And it does it by, again, investing in a retrograde past technology. When you look around the world right now, China, Germany, France, Canada, advanced economies are not investing backwards in more oil. They're investing in clean energy because they know that's where the future is. They're not investing in the horse and buggy. They're not investing in past technologies. They are moving to the future. Right now, we are aligning ourselves once again with countries like North Korea and Iran in investing in oil so heavily, like Russia. So again, I would just urge you all, we have a moral imperative to act right now, to act in a way that stewards our environment, that pays it forward to the children and unborn children that are out there. And so I urge my colleagues to think carefully about this bill because it really is devastating to our economy, to our environment, but also to our future. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? The gentlelady from New Mexico, Ms. Stansberry, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm really pissed off this morning. This bill is part of a larger reconciliation package that is completely false in its premise. The GOP is trying to pass a massive tax break to billionaires by re-upping 2017 tax breaks that went to billionaires, millionaires, and corporations, except for this time, it will cost the American people $7 trillion. And to try to claim that they're going to be fiscally responsible, they're attempting to find a few $1 trillion in savings here and there. And the way in which they're going to try to find that $1.5 to $2 trillion savings is by cutting Medicaid. They're saying they're not going to, but they already passed a resolution twice that would cut Medicaid by $880 billion in the Energy and Commerce Committee. They want to cut food assistance and SNAP. And they want to open our public lands to massive amounts of drilling, mining, and mandatory logging. And the committee print that is here today is that piece of the reconciliation bill. But it's entirely BS. You're going to hear for hours today about how this is about balancing the budget, because let's do some basic math here. The tax breaks are going to cost $7 trillion, and they're only proposing about $1.5 trillion in offsets. Well, that doesn't add up. And that's why this reconciliation package is actually going to cost $4 to $5 trillion just this year in debt spending. It's going to blow a hole through the deficit of $37 trillion over the next 30 years. So don't buy the BS you're going to hear today that this is about balancing the budget, because that is a lie. It's not true. And do not buy the BS that you're going to hear today that says that this is not about policy, because that is exactly what this reconciliation package is here in this committee today. That is exactly what they're trying to do. Because inside this bill, which dropped on Friday, I have to say, I got this at 6 a.m. I was actually on the West Coast, and I read it, and I was shocked. Has mandatory oil and gas drilling and lease sales on public lands and offshore, mandatory logging requirements. It gives away public lands, not to the highest bidder, but the lowest bidder. It has mandatory requirements that would do away with public review. That means that you couldn't participate in public planning. It means you couldn't participate in the process that was put in place 50 years ago for Americans to have their voices heard, so we didn't do destructive things on public lands and tribal lands. And it takes away your rights in the courts to actually contest what might happen as a result of opening public and sensitive lands to drilling, mining, and mandatory logging. That is actually what this bill is all about. And sure, it'll generate a few $1 billion, but also don't buy the BS that this is about unleashing American energy, because you know what's happening right now in the oil and gas markets? They're tanking, and they're tanking because of Donald Trump's tariffs. And you know who's stepping in? OPEC. Because what's happening right now is that our economy is in total chaos. And because of that, oil prices are going down, demand is going down, and so they're actually shutting down rigs right now in the United States. So the claim that by having mandatory lease sales is going to unleash American energy in the United States is just BS. It's not going to save you money. It's not going to unleash American energy. This bill is going to gut protections for public lands. It is opposed by tribes across the country because it would take away judicial rights. It would take away rights to review what is happening on sensitive public lands. And it is based on a completely false premise that will undermine the protection of our economy, the American people, our communities, and the environment. And that is why we are prepared to sit here all day and fight this bill, because it is complete BS.
The gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? The gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Dexter, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I came to Congress as a mother who had a child dealing with climate anxiety from 5 years old on. Our children are fearing for the health of their planet. I also came here as a physician in pulmonary and critical care. I understand what happens to the body when we neglect environmental policy when people are breathing polluted air. And I also came here as a Northwest native who is an outdoors enthusiast. I ski, I hike. I cannot believe that we are putting our public lands at risk for the benefit of some billionaires and some stockholders. These places are treasured, they connect us to each other, to our heritage, and they tell us something about ourselves, and they deserve our protection. This fight is deeply personal today, and it should be for all of us. I'm not alone. Oregonians and the American people expect us to protect our federal lands. Yet today, this committee is considering a bill that will let corporations and billionaires basically take the land that we own ourselves, the people, and love to enrich themselves. House Republicans are attempting to hand over public lands and waters to billionaires and big oil against the will of the American people. 3 out of 4 Americans oppose closing off access to public lands. We've had that debate here, but that doesn't seem to matter to my colleagues across the aisle. Let's talk now about what this bill actually does. It raises energy prices for working families by doubling down on dirty fuels, oil, gas, and coal, while making clean energy like wind and solar more expensive. It strips $250 million from our national park staff at a time when our parks are already stretched far too thin. And it does something even more dangerous. It allows rich companies to pay handsomely so that they can write any environmental assessment or impact statement they wish and be immune to any tribal, judicial, or administrative review. Let me say this again. This bill gives rich companies a green light to pay off the government and avoid any accountability for keeping our environment safe, and the American people will have no say about it. These are the people's lands, not the lands of the rich. And who pays the price? Everyday Americans, the communities downwind from a refinery, the families living next to a drilling site, the tribes who have fought to protect their sacred land for generations, and our children, who will inherit a world where profit was prioritized over protection. As the ranking member of the Oversight Subcommittee, I am alarmed at how brazen these efforts are to exclude the public from decisions that will define the health of our planet for generations to come. This bill isn't just environmentally reckless, it's anti-democratic. It locks out the voices of the people, it erodes our ability to hold polluters accountable, and it hands over the keys to corporations who see our public lands not as places of beauty or biodiversity, but as commodities to be extracted and sold. In Oregon, we know better. We know that protecting our lands is not just about having a conversation. It is about protecting our climate, public health, and fighting for generational justice. We know that true stewardship means listening to communities, honoring tribal sovereignty, and investing in a clean energy future that is both sustainable and equitable. I didn't come to Congress to watch public trust erode and our environmental legacy to be auctioned off. I came here to build a better, healthier world for our children. And I also came here to be a voice for people who don't have lobbyists or legal teams. I came here to fight for the children, mine and yours, who are counting on us to do the right thing. And that's what I will continue to do today, all day, tomorrow, and every day. To my colleagues, do not turn your back on the people who sent you here, who believe that you have their back. Do not turn your back on your children, who will live with the consequences of this moment. We can and we must do better. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? Mr. Lamalfa, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Man, the rhetoric flying here today, I knew it was going to be a fun one, but we talk a lot about billionaires in this meeting here. The Democrats have the vast majority of the billionaires that love what they do, so all the money seems to be flying that direction, and all this talk about energy and where it comes from. You know, everybody that isn't within driving distance probably got here on an aircraft that consumed a form of energy that they're bad-mouthing here today, and it has to come from somewhere. fascinating. As far as BS, my neighbor was applying it to his rice field the other day here in order to grow organic crops. So I think that even has a positive side effect too there. Unfortunately, he only gets about 1/3 of the yield of the neighboring rice fields, but that's all right. You know, it has its niche. That all said, let's really get to the point on air quality and the quality of our lands, and that would be the forestry provisions in this package that do actually save money. They make money for the federal government by increasing timber harvesting by 25% on 117 million acres of overgrown forest lands, either identified as an extreme fire danger or having a severe insect infestation that will eventually lead to that. These are high-risk lands that have been identified that need work. We're taking the real steps in this legislation to reduce the billions of taxpayer dollars we have to waste every year fighting catastrophic wildfires. A 1 million-acre fire happened in my district a couple years ago, whose such intense smoke plume went up into the jet stream and ended up descending on New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., where people were advised not to go outside and do exercise because of that 1 million-acre fire from lack of management, a severe lack of management. So we talk about mandatory harvest and mandatory work in the forest. Yeah, that's what we pay the U.S. Forest Service to do, is mandatorily doing the work that needs to be done so we can manage these lands and not burn our communities and burn the assets and burn the wildlife and soil the air and the waterways that are the results of year after year after year of 6-digit, even 7-digit fires that happen. The Forest Service used to turn a profit. Revenue from timber sales helped fund local schools, roads, and basic services in rural counties. Now we have to come hat in hand and hope we can pass the Secure Rural Schools funding in order to make up for what used to be the timber industry that used to provide wood and paper products to Americans. Now the U.S. is the #1 importer of wood products. Instead, we burn it. So there's provisions in this package in sections 80313 and 80314 move in the direction of fixing that. Congressional Budget Office estimates the increase in BLM timber harvest alone will generate $8 million in new revenue. Combine that with some reduced fire suppression and recovery costs, it adds up fast. These forestry reforms contribute directly to the $15 billion in total savings from the natural resources portion of the reconciliation package. And unlike a lot of what happens around here, that's just not theoretical. It's real dollars that don't have to be pulled from the taxpayers later on. Not just about savings, it's rebuilding a responsible forest management system that actually works for people, for parks, for recreation, for air quality, water quality, and wow, even jobs in local economies that used to have them. These provisions allow 20-year contracts so that if we were to build a mill, $100 million, $200 million mill in order to use these products domestically with local jobs and the people that build these mills, a 20-year contract would ensure that they will be able to make back their investment, which, you know, a lot of people don't understand investment and costs like that around here, but if you're going to build the mill, you need to know that you're going to have the input, the throughput there for a period of time until a whim of another lawsuit or another administration comes along and stops it. If you want to have these mills, if you want to have the jobs, if you want to have the output, if you want to have the forest being cleansed, you need to have that infrastructure. So it would mean reversing the trend of having lost 1,500 sawmills since year 2000, especially areas like mine in Northern California. We used to have a thriving timber industry, but so many of our western states. Rebuilding that infrastructure brings back the jobs, grows the tax base, and reduces the need for federal economic aid. Again, even more savings. So we're not even touching the wilderness. We're not even clear-cutting the national parks. These harvests are focused on areas already designated for timber production, non-wilderness and non-roadless, and they still follow strict management plans. We'd be thinning the most dangerous overgrown areas, the 117 million acres I lined out, the same ones that turn small fires into massive disasters year after year after year. So you want to talk about disaster costs? Look at, you know, the last few years in the billions. Towns wiped out, all the damage sustained to the environment. These are preventable. So let's move in that direction with this legislation. It's common sense, it's conservative, and it's long overdue. I urge my colleagues to support these cost-saving reforms, finally start managing our forests like we mean it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the committee print? Mr. Hernandez from Puerto Rico, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this committee has the power and the responsibility to protect our planet. I was inspired when in 2022, this committee, under the leadership of Mr. Grijalva, secured $1 billion to bring solar panels to vulnerable communities in Puerto Rico. About $365 million of that is still pending disbursement. But today I am deeply disappointed. As one of the youngest members of this committee and of Congress, I'm disappointed to witness an unprecedented assault on our natural resources, on climate action, and on the future that my generation will inherit. And I am disappointed that the government of Puerto Rico, whose governor is a former member of this committee, is walking away from up to $1.3 billion in funding to appease this administration and to please fossil fuel special interests. Now, I want to say that again in Spanish for the benefit of my constituents. Nuestro gobierno está dejando sobre la mesa 1.3 billones de dólares que se pueden utilizar para atender nuestra crisis energética. Yes, the government of a bankrupt island with a collapsing energy grid has chosen to drop a $1 billion lawsuit against oil companies and to give up the fight for the $365 million that this committee allocated for clean, reliable solar power. Now, I have said publicly that I am willing to support any measure that brings stability to Puerto Rico's energy grid, even if this change is not brought on through renewable energy. However, we should not close the door on the opportunities we have to bring stability through environmentally friendly resources. Now, that lawsuit that the government is dropping was meant to compensate our people for the harm that they've endured. Those funds for solar panels were meant to lift up the most vulnerable with energy independence and dignity. And now, irresponsibly, those funds have been abandoned. And now, unfortunately, this committee has abandoned that sort of initiative that benefited people in Puerto Rico and across the United States. Politics is about choices. Some choose to protect polluters. I choose to protect their victims. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the committee print? The chair now recognizes Ms. Elfeth. Thank you.
Close, Madam Chair. Elfreth, thank you very much for that recognition. Colleagues, like so many of you, I came to Congress, and I'm sure this is true of both sides of the aisle. I came to Congress to protect, restore, and make available to the public, the broader public, to enjoy more of our natural resources. I came here to have honest conversations, and obviously we're going to have policy differences about the best approaches to balance the needs of our constituents. We're going to talk about that a lot today, but also our deep and sincere obligation to steward our natural resources, not just for our time here in Congress or even our time on this planet, but frankly for generations to come. I am not here to engage in hyperbole, so I'm just going to dive right into the facts of this bill and why I share so many of my colleagues' concerns over where it will take this nation and our natural resources. So let's just get into the facts. It's a fact that the United States produces more oil and gas than any country in the history of the world. This has been true since 2009 through administrations of both parties and remains true today. The U.S. Energy Administration's data from 2023 indicates that U.S. total petroleum production averaged about 21.691 million barrels per day. In that same year, the U.S. exported 10.15 million barrels per day of petroleum to 173 countries and 3 U.S. territories, resulting in net petroleum imports that were 1.6 million barrels per day, which means that the United States was a net petroleum exporter of 1.6 million per day. So we are here. Why are we here when we're talking about exporting and importing so much oil if the goal is energy independence? And again, I share many of my colleagues' sincere wish to make sure that our constituents can afford the energy that they use. But this bill is not going to result in that because the problem is in the chemistry. The crude oil that is extracted in the U.S. is lighter than the oil we import from other countries, meaning it needs to be processed differently. It cannot be processed in the same refineries as process the heavier crude, and refineries in the U.S. are simply